Joined now by the first guest of the day. She is Kelly Loeffler. She is doing fantastic work down in the state of Georgia. Appreciate her joining us right now. Kelly, let's just start off. First of all, it's good to talk with you. I think I saw you months ago down in April at your event. Really enjoyed speaking at the Greater Georgia event you put on. I know you're fighting battles every single day down in Georgia. How optimistic are you as we sit about 4.5 months out that Georgia is going to flip back to a red state and Trump is going to beat Biden in your state?
Well, Clay, it's great to be back with you. We had a blast together in Georgia. So grateful for you coming down and speaking to hundreds of grassroots activists and leaders in Georgia. You know, what we're doing in Georgia is going to put us in a very different position than we were in 2020. So I was just speaking at a Republican lawyers group, and we were talking about how the preparation and the readiness is so much more informed by what happened in 2020. And we're looking ahead to win in 2024, but it's going to take work every single day on the ground. And that's what we're doing. We're doing voter roll cleanup, voter registration, making sure that kids in colleges know that the conservative movement is where freedom and opportunity is. We're reaching out to the Black and Hispanic communities. So we see that momentum on the ground. We're taking nothing for granted. And look, the polls look positive, but the only one that matters is on November 5th.
No doubt. And as you look at those polls and kind of think forward, June 27th, we've been having a discussion about this. You've run for office before. You know when people really kind of start to pay attention. A lot of times people say the election actually begins after Labor Day. Why is this debate happening 6 days from now? What do you think June 27th tells us about the state of this race?
Clay, I think it tells us a lot. I think it tells us that voters are ready for this to happen. But more importantly, this debate needs to happen because Americans want to hear the contrast between the two visions and the two records that have been clearly demonstrated uniquely now in both presidencies. And, you know, I think Democrats are a little concerned about what's going on with their candidate. And I think this is going to be a pressure test. And it's a huge opportunity to make sure that President Trump tells the story of his 4 years in office, how it elevated Americans across the board. And I don't know how Biden is going to defend his record. And I think it's super critical that we hear from him because we're in a perilous place in this country. I mean, we have unprecedented risks at home and abroad. And he needs to answer for where he has put this country.
We're talking to Kelly Loeffler. All right, Kelly, you owned a WNBA franchise in Atlanta. And so you know the struggles to get attention, how difficult it's been to build this business. For people out there who aren't familiar with your tenure as the owner of the WNBA franchise in Atlanta, Caitlin Clark is playing there tonight. I believe there is a massive amount of attention for this game, particularly because she's bringing that amount of attention. But before we get to Caitlin Clark, what was your experience like as a WNBA owner, and why are you not still a WNBA owner?
Well, the short answer to your last question is because the WNBA stopped being about basketball and started being about partisan politics. But let me tell you, being a team owner for a decade was an incredible experience because for most of that time, the league was about sport and the uniting power of basketball. And I saw that firsthand when I lived in Chicago during the 90s, during the Bulls run. I had a $50 standing room only ticket, and it was exciting. I saw how a team can unite a city. And I wanted to bring that spirit of basketball to Atlanta. So for a decade, my business partner and I were 50-50 owners in the team. And, you know, it's interesting that the debates in Atlanta, this game tonight is in Atlanta, and that's exactly where the Olympics were held in '96, that David Stern, if you remember, the commissioner of the NBA, was inspired to create a women's league. And I think he'd be rolling over in his grave right now if he saw that what Caitlin Clark brings to the league and how she's being treated, because at that time, we would have done anything to have a player like that, a phenom, a sensation. And the WNBA is effectively turning they're back on her. She's been shunned from the Olympics, and they're defending all her detractors in the league. So it's really puzzling that we have this great player that's elevating the game, that is responsible for 1/3 of ticket sales in a league that's reportedly losing $50 million. And it could really help restore and actually save the league.
You had issues in the WNBA because you had a crazy idea and you just kind of hinted at that. Hey, this league should bring everybody together. If I remember correctly, your issues with the WNBA to a large extent dealt with them going all in on BLM. And what I think is one of the craziest stories of the entire 2020 sports calendar year, for people out there who have forgotten, the individual in, I believe it was Waukesha, Wisconsin, who was shot. He was armed with a knife. He was a person who had abused women. The woman who he had abused called asking for police come to protect her. And all of the WNBA women wrote his name on the T-shirts that they made and protested the police in Wisconsin showing up to protect that woman. I felt like I was taking crazy pills. You had to as well.
I did, because the WNBA was formed to empower women, to inspire young girls. I was a young girl playing in sports that we didn't really have women role models, but I loved Michael Jordan, and to see women standing up for other women would have been really amazing. But they insisted on partnering with this BLM organization, Marxist leadership, self-avowed Marxists, put a Marxist on the WNBA Social Justice Committee. And BLM was all about defunding the police. And at that time, I said, we need to use sports for unity. And I think we all remember during 2020 when The Last Dance played on ESPN during the pandemic, and everyone was so excited. It brought people together. But the WNBA went against that and said, no, we're going to stand with BLM and not stand with the basketball and the bigger community. So I was the only sports team owner to stand up and speak out against it and say, we should unite around the American flag. We can use this to bring people together, to inspire people through these challenging times. And for that, they attacked me and tried to cancel me. And I refused to bend the knee.
Well, it's super brave, and I'm glad you're telling that story to the extent this audience hasn't heard it. We're talking to former U.S. Senator, Greater Georgia Chairwoman Kelly Loeffler. All right, tonight, Caitlin Clark is coming to Atlanta. Why do you think the WNBA has tripped all over itself in the way that they have responded to Caitlin Clark? What is the story here? And certainly I think, but I'm curious what your opinion is it about something other than basketball itself?
Well, it shouldn't be. The story is Caitlin Clark can save the WNBA if the WNBA can get politics out of the way, but they can't because they won't let it. If you look at what Caitlin Clark has done in terms of bringing attention, a spotlight, viewership, record viewership was just hit last week with 3 million people watching the Sky Fever game. Arenas are selling out when she plays there. Nike has given her something like $28 million contract. And she's a great player. She's all about basketball, but she's not about the leftist political ideology that the league wants everyone to bow down to. And so they're, seeing the challenges of that, where players are lashing out against Caitlin. Caitlin is rising above it. She's playing through it. She's one of the fiercest competitors out there. She can take the physicality. She can take the toughness. We've even had to have a congressman from Indiana write a letter to the league that says, wait a minute, it feels like there's a player that's being treated differently. Meanwhile, all the other players are saying, well, she gets special whistles. And I just say, okay, that's when they actually don't have an answer for her skill level. Because if you're blaming it on the refs, she has a record. You can look at her stats right now. She's one of the top players in the league. She's certainly the best rookie in the league. And she's been overtly left off of the Olympic roster. So look, she still has a chance to save the league. The league can recover from this if they embrace her and elevate her just like every other player. But we haven't seen that happening yet.
You've been a really successful entrepreneur in your career. I'm curious how you would assess this, because sometimes it seems to me that people would rather be part of a small company or entity that they have control over than build something truly massive. And you mentioned Jordan in The Last Dance and going to watch him play $50 tickets in Chicago. To me, that's a perfect example. Jordan and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson came into the league and they changed it forever and made people care about the NBA that might not have before. We just saw one more recently in the late 90s. Tiger Woods came into the PGA and brought a brand new audience and took the PGA to a different level than golf had ever been before. Why do you think the WNBA, which you know better than anybody, has been begging and starved for attention and trying to make people care about their sport, has been given this Tiger Woods-like gift and tripped all over it?
Well, and let me even add one more example. I've had a conversation with NBA Commissioner Adam Silver about this, his vision for the WNBA. Look at what Venus and Serena Williams did for tennis. The audiences they brought in, they expanded that sport. That could have been tremendous. The fact is, Caitlin Clark does not fit the mold that they want in the WNBA. She doesn't bring the intersectional qualities that they think are required to put on a pedestal, and they want to make sure that they preserve this left-wing ideology. And if you don't buy into it and you don't promote it, then you can't be promoted on their platform. And that's just really tragic for the league and for the valuations of the teams. I think, if that's going to hold them back, that's a shame, because here we have a talented player that's potentially influencing thousands of other young girls who want to be part of athletics. Maybe not basketball, maybe it's tennis or golf, but they want to see that there's a chance for them to succeed. And yet we have WNBA players going down the road of advocating to allow men in sports. They're writing op-ed after op-ed about it. And this is where the league stands right now. And it's not heading in the right direction, given the platform they've been offered.
Would you have ever believed, you said you grew up playing sports, I know a lot of the people out there listening did as well. Would you ever believe that we'd find a place where a woman like Dawn Staley, who is probably right now the most prominent women's coach in all of college, I think that's fair to say, would be saying, hey, if you're a man who identifies as a woman, you should be able to come and get a women's scholarship and compete in women's basketball? Like 20 years ago, would you have believed this would have ever been possible?
I can't believe it today. Certainly not 20 years ago. In fact, before she passed, I had the opportunity to meet the late, great Pat Summitt, who fought so hard, amazing woman, and fought so hard to have women have the same opportunities. Now they're virtually trying to hand it to men on the silver platter. And, while the American Team USA is going for their 8th consecutive Olympic gold medal, who knows? The 9th one may not be possible because there may be a man playing on Team Spain or, whatever. So, it's one of those things that you can't believe it and you hope that we can get back to normal. But I was the first senator in the history of the United States to introduce protecting women and girls sports language in the Senate. I could only get a few other Republican senators on that bill with me, and it didn't even get brought to the floor. And I was criticized for it being divisive because everyone said, we don't need a bill to do that. Well, 4 years later, we should have had that bill because too many girls are getting excluded, too many boys are in girls' locker rooms, and now states are trying to codify, and the federal government through Title IX rollbacks, trying to codify allowing men in women's sports and in women's locker rooms. And it's not fair to young girls.
It's absolutely crazy. Kelly Loeffler, I just came back from Atlanta with my kids, went and watched the Atlanta Braves play. Absolutely amazing time. Georgia needs to go back red. How can people help if they're listening to you right now and they're listening and they're in Georgia or they're around the country and they want to help what you're doing?
Well, first of all, if you're in Georgia, go to greatergeorgia.com, sign up to get involved, and we'll get you involved right away. Also, if you're around the country, contact your local GOP chapter, young Republicans, college Republicans. Reach out and get involved in something, because when we look at the polls, we can see things are going in the right direction, but you have to ask yourself, what am I doing to make sure that we stay there? And it's not just enough to say, I'm going to vote. You have to do a little bit more. Talk to your friends and family. Don't get canceled about being conservative, and be proud. Get out and talk to your family and friends as much as you can about getting involved.
Kelly, look forward to seeing you again soon. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Clay. Great to see you. Go Braves.
Go Braves indeed. Starting to win a little bit, by the way. 6-1. Playing the Yankees tonight for our WOR listeners up there. It's going to be a good one.